Good morning, friends, and welcome to Aislynn and the Backyard Gardener, Aislynn at the Gardener, whatever we're calling it these days, right? Good morning, happy Sunday. I'm so glad to see you all here today. If you have questions today, definitely answer questions, ask questions, and Joe, who's going to be entering into all the conversations today because we have a lot to talk about today, is on the backside over there, and he will be sure to let me know what your questions are and to give me those comments so that we can stay engaged throughout this. Now, for those of you that are regular followers, you know that within the next probably five to 6 weeks, in that range, we are going to be shifting our entire life off of the backyard gardens that you guys all have begun to know and love so well and onto the farm where we are officially moving our lives. We are out here at Freedom Harvest Farms this morning, and over the weeks that we've been popping out here showing things off, I've been showing you my gardens up there in the front. So this is the front road that comes up to the house. So if you were driving past our house, you would see some gardens in the front. You will also see the grapevine vineyards, and these are the orchards right here, just a small orchard right here out here in the front. And then as you come back this direction, you've got these beautiful, nice mesquite trees, and you start to begin to enter into the space where our actual backyard is at.
We just harvested some fruit off of these orchard trees. What are you harvesting out of here on throughout the course of a year? A little context.
Throughout the year, we do have some citrus trees, although this past year with the freeze, the citrus trees were knocked a little bit back. And we've been putting in some new ones. We were having some health issues with some of the citrus trees out here anyway, so those are some things that needed to be shifted regardless. We also have peaches that do harvest from this orchard. That is very challenging because we just simply don't have enough chill hours down here in the south. Even with that crazy freeze, we just simply didn't have a really good quality chill hour season this year. We did get some peaches, so those were nice. The plums just simply are still not producing. We have those out there as well. But the things that are really doing well out there, we have apples every year. The apples still can be a bit challenged, especially in a freeze year like this. They don't like the clay soil that we have, so we're learning what's the best way to manage those guys. But the pears and the figs have been glorious. We have beautiful, beautiful pears and figs. So yes, we were just harvesting some pears off there the other day. Also, things that are being harvested out of that are just pretty, your all-season garden, vegetable gardens, your root vegetables, your stems, your flowers, your all of your different fruiting plants, all of that kind of stuff is up there in the front as well, and of course the grapevines too. So that's a concept, that's a little bit of a background of what kinds of things we're growing up there in the front. But now, as we get to actually landscaping around our actual home, that's where we're at right now. So and like I said, we've got these nice mesquite trees that make kind of an entry up into what I would consider our backyard. And then we've got this nice big picnic table that's going to be adjusted around to find just the right spot for us to have a really nice area to come right outside of our house, right out onto our porches, and to sit in our backyard. Now, this is big property, much bigger than what we've been dealing with before. And we're only taking in probably, I would say, less than an acre of the land right here around our house. So that can be a little bit more in alignment with what you're looking at thinking about when you're working in more urban spaces. So we're just biting off small chunks as we begin to take over a backyard, basically. So things we need to keep in mind as we're creating that homestead backyard is that we have a little dog, and a little dog can't mix with our big pasture friends over here, and can't mix with our big pasture friends in the back there. So some things that we're going to have to do, of course, before we even can move is to make sure that we get some fencing up. And so those are some things we've been talking a little bit about. And one of the things you've got to keep in mind when you're putting fencing and you're working to create as an efficient option as possible is you want to take in fences you already have. But with pasture fencing, what are some of the options that we could do to shift pasture fencing in a way that can have small dogs' yard?
Okay, well, the first thing I'm looking at here is the size of the squares in this agricultural fence, and can our little dog get through? And certainly he can through that, I would say, 5-inch by 4-inch square if he really, really wanted to. And with cattle on the other side that are going to be so much fun to interact with, I think he would have a reason to try to get through there.
Right.
So your options on this are to replace the fabric with a smaller square, or cut a 18-inch strip of fabric and then secure it to the bottom of this fence. That is your least expensive option. That is the option I'm suggesting. Also, because we share this fence with a neighbor, I don't want to take it down and to put it back up.
Do something else.
Right.
Now, things we have considered and will have to keep in mind as we're talking homestead planning is this is a porch we want to enjoy, we want to sit on.
I would say that's the porch where we're going to spend a lot of our time.
Right, exactly.
That's right out of our master bedroom is through that door.
As most of you know, I've been able to manage in the backyard gardens because of fencing, because of trees, because of all that stuff. I've been able to manage the wind. But out here, we get massive wind and it comes right from this direction at certain times of the year. So that being the case, what are we going to do about wind blocking protecting our trees, protecting our gardens, protecting our home, the places we want to actually hang out? So this corner over here is something we have to think about. Now, there's been conversations about like wood fence paneling, and if you didn't already know, the cost of wood and wood fence paneling is ridiculous.
I expect it to come down drastically in the next 2 months. You're already seeing a decrease at the supplier level. It just hasn't made its way down to your box stores and lumber yards.
Right. And then you've got to begin thinking about, so not just the price on things, but you've got to begin thinking about actually how does the wind move through that? Because sometimes a wood paneled fence, a really tall wood paneled fence, whatever, number one, will it actually stay up in the wind? Because that's literally like a sail. And then number two, what kind of wind shear does it create for your gardens, right? And it actually can create problems when it comes to a full block and then the wind goes over the block and then through. It actually can create more problems. So we've begun thinking about what are the different types of trees, different types of things that we can plant on this fence line that will help out with that.
Because you should say that this is the prevailing wind direction, and you can tell that by the direction of these windmills.
Right, exactly. And clearly we're in the windy place because that's where the windmills are at.
Right, they're not putting windmills for energy production into a non-windy location.
Right, okay. So other things we're thinking about as we're thinking about this outer fence out here is the fact that we are going to want to pull a tractor through here from time to time. We might actually in the future want to move animals through here. So that being said, if we're going to fence all the way out, that's fine. However, we want to make sure we have nice big double gates and lanes where mowers can go through and all kinds of things like that. So this is to the main big pasture in the back, a gate where we could open it up. We could drive the tractor through. This is actually how they brought the chicken coop through from the back pasture in with a tractor, was that we had this gate available. So when we go to fence that side in to keep the dog in our backyard, we're going to put another double gate. And what that does is that creates a lane right here where then I won't begin planning. As you've seen me planning my backyard gardens over the years, these are things I have to be keeping in mind. What spaces do I want open, wide, and easy to move through?
Yeah, so you're suggesting that between this hugelkultur bed and this fence, this just remains a work alley that is...
What I would say is that if you look at the line right there where the barn is, that's the line that is completely open.
Okay, so this just remains pasture grass.
Exactly.
Okay, makes sense, makes sense. You want to go talk about the chicken coop for a little while?
Let's do the chicken coop. And okay, so here, before we get there, I'm moving myself back that direction. This is an old hugelkultur bed that actually didn't really get planted or done anything with this season because I had so many other gardens. So one of the things that we're going to do to get this garden ready, because I actually will begin to integrate. This is the first
It'll be steps
garden
from your doorway. Of course, it'll be a lot easier to maintain.
Yes, and I want to talk about that concept of kitchen garden. The idea of kitchen garden isn't just some like frou-frou word that we use to describe one garden versus another garden. The point of the kitchen garden actually came from the farm. And on the farm, the garden that was closest to the kitchen or closest to where someone could pop in and out of the house is the kitchen garden. And it would be a full-fledged garden with all of the different types of vegetables that you wanted to grow in it, all the herbs, all the fruits, all the things like that, right next to your home, where out in the fields would be the big garden or the big farm fields or whatever it is we're doing to do larger scale production and growth. So you'll still have right outside your door, as close to your house as you can get, your chicken coop where you're going to keep your backyard chickens, not your pasture chickens, not your big hens that are all pasture raised laying in the back fields. No. Your babies, your pets, your home chickens, your backyard chickens. That's what we're going to do there. So when I talk about this hugelkultur bed, And I often talk to folks when I'm doing my edible landscape consultations, my homestead consultations, what do you have and where do you go from there? Create your boundaries, think about what you absolutely have to have in place, and then grow and build from that point. And one of the great ways to do that is the next step we could do over here is, of course, we want to weed it down, cover it with black plastic, make sure it's got a lot of water in it, let it break down really nicely, but go ahead and mulch around it really nicely so it can begin to set the initial boundaries that then begin to create the footpath.
How long does that black plastic stay on before you take it off and begin working the...
This time of year, you don't need to leave it for very long. You can leave it for maybe 2 or 3 weeks because you don't want to kill everything. And you're not talking about, like, try to find some plastic that is purposefully and intently used for that purpose, other than to leach some plastic that you don't want into your soil. So find plastic that has a purpose for that kind of weed killing, right?
About 3 feet off of the ground, the
Yes,
top of the hump.
All it's really going to do is get moist, hot, and start to break down, and then we can actually pull in some of the materials that we have here on the farm and put it on there. I can put some more topsoil on there. I can put some more compost on top of there, and then I can plant that. I can mulch it, and I can begin my first garden. This is my first backyard garden here on the farm, right here. Then with each season, as I want to build more raised beds, as I want to do different types of hugelkultur beds, just like I did over the years at the backyard garden in town, I do the exact same thing, and I start sculpting this land into what I want. I begin to learn where water settles, things like that. So some of the things we already know about is where the water settles. It rolls right off the house right here, and it bombards this part of the yard right here and just sits. And of course, we've made places for it to sit at this point because we put a chicken coop in here and we've built up around it, and now we've got to get in there and build up around it and put some stuff in there. But we've created, humans, places for water to be held on the land.
And the methods for the waters to collect in one area.
Right.
Because this roof is going to collect a lot of area and a lot of water in a nice rainstorm.
Right.
So it only makes sense that if you consider the pitch of the roof coming this way and this way, that this corner is going to dump a lot of water right here.
Exactly.
So your simple solution is to put up some guttering.
Yep.
And then drop it here or there or in the corner maybe, wherever the proper place is for, what did you have in mind?
Water conservation. Water conservation is going to be, in my opinion, one of the most important things for homesteaders. I think that we are going to be in the ups and downs of rain. I think that we're going to see our summer months as we always have, but I think we're going to see a long tropical summer, wet summer, and then we're going to see a long, dry, good, growing fall and winter. That means we want to use that water we collected in the summertime and make sure it gets into our plants and make sure we have it available in case there's any kind of concern with the water grid or any kind of concern with our water in our area. And I don't know where you live, but where we live, we do have concerns with the water from time to time, and sometimes it only has to do with the concept of drought. So conserving water has become an essential part of my thinking about what is important for our homestead. And not to say that it hasn't always been an essential part of that, but here now we're beginning to plan our own space and think about how we want to be able to capture water, conserve water, and use water. So thinking about how we use the space as it comes up close to the house, how we collect that water as it comes down, where we want to put mulch, where we want to create drains, because we still don't want to just keep pushing water out and then it's standing out here. Well, then push it out a little further, then it's standing right there. Push it out. So you have to begin to think about that, and that's really a lot of that permaculture conversation, permaculture, drainage, swales, berms, all of those types of things, looking at how water moves through your land, and water definitely moves through this land, and we have put a lot of soil, drainage, all kinds of things on this land to move the water to where we want to. Let's flip out here real quick so I can just show people. At the end of the day, that is our biggest rainwater conservation act right there. We are conserving as much water as we can possibly get right there in our tank on our land, and we actually pull water from that when we need to, when we want to, that kind of thing. And so that's something for us to think about. How do we make sure that all the water that we want, we're holding the water that we want here on the land with the mulch, and then we're moving the rest of the water that we don't want into our pond, and that water stays active. Flip the camera around where you can see the pond over there. It's green. That means that that water is not fluid. That means that water's sitting. Okay, so some things like that are things that you need to keep in mind about your conservation. Water needs to be active and alive and fluid and moving.
The water in that tank over there, that pond that's green, is like a basin that you have in your backyard that eventually gets a film of algae throughout it because it's not flowing.
And it'll eventually I think they have some nice clay over there. But it'll eventually dry out if we don't have more rain to fill it. But the fact of the matter is, if you see something sitting like that, it's just a space holding water. There's no active flow happening there. And you want some active flow happening.
So this is a chicken coop that your folks were using in the back pasture, and then they kind of quit using it. And it's a beautiful asset. It's got great bones.
Yep.
And so like you said earlier, they moved it over to here for us to use. We've got 7 or so chickens in our backyard at home. The idea of what a chicken coop is going to fundamentally change in my mind. Well, mine was an urban chicken coop. There were codes required to keep chickens away from your neighbors. And here we don't have that as much. So if you
But we are still thinking, remember I said that, we're still thinking like backyard chickens. These are still our pets, really. And so we're keeping the quantity small, but we're also building them something that we can look at, where we can have a rooster up here if we want to.
So what we're going to do here is put a floor in so that it is above the ground, so the chickens have a place to get some shade.
Yes, they can get some shade. They can also hide from predators, and these are important things. If there's a hawk that flies, because one of the things we've decided not to do is to not put aviary netting around at this time. When we live in the city, we've put aviary netting on ours. And actually, when we've had other coops, even in the country areas, we've put aviary netting depending on where the coop was at. But we put this coop purposefully underneath this huge, massive, shading mesquite tree.
That's right.
These trees,
let's step back and take a look at it.
Yes.
And the chickens will have access to this mesquite tree. I expect them to go up and pick ants and bugs off of the mesquite tree. This tank and all of this lumber will be gone. So then we've got to begin thinking about how large we want a taller fence, 6 foot, around only this chicken coop area, and then incorporating that into a smaller fence, 4 foot, out to the perimeter for the dog. The dog does not have access inside the chicken coop. The chickens, ideally, don't get outside of the chicken run. I said coop earlier, I meant run. But then everything back here is you're calling your initial backyard garden, and that could grow over time. We might take in some more space on the other side of the house. But here's where I see, without really talking to you much about it, kind of like that wonderland that you created in our backyard that you've been, putting on these videos for well over a year now. The pathways of hugelkultur beds that are covered in all kinds of delicious food and then gorgeous flowers, so that when you're walking through here 2 years from now, 2.5 years from now, however long it takes, you're walking through a wonderland where a centerpiece happens to be a chicken coop. And I imagine that over time...
A coop and a greenhouse.
The greenhouse, right.
Yeah, maybe a little sitting area over here, a little sitting area over there, all kinds of things that come. But I'm very adamant, always over the years, about this concept of evolving. And, Joe, we were describing how we take a road trip, how we go on vacation the other day. I feel like this is a very good story to explain the way that a garden really can and should come together. And that is, you lay out your map, right? And you put the places you're going to stop. You've made reservations at that 5-star farm-to-table restaurant.
Your hotel.
You're going to put that on there. Your Airbnb or your hotel, you put that one on there because that's where you're staying. So that's the same kind of situation here. And as the house began renovations, as things began happening, we need another little air conditioner over here for this extra room we put on. We're going to put the propane tank on here in the back because we're going to have a gas stove in this location. All of the things that start to come. Where do we want to put the chicken coop? Okay, we got the chicken coop. Now we've got the greenhouse. It's over here. How does that, when we look out the windows of the house, how does that look out here? Okay, what are some other things we need to think about? Let's walk around to the other side of the house. So you start thinking about all of the different, the spots on your road trip map to the destination of the fantasy land that you want to create around you. Another mesquite tree, providing some shade. Okay, well, I want to have this area fenced off so that my dog can't get up. So I'm going to come inside the fence here and create a little fence. Is that my understanding? We're going to put a little one-person walk gate in here?
Yeah, correct. This will be the front boundary of the backyard when it comes to fencing, with this mesquite tree being outside of it. So fencing coming this way, 90ing over to this barn.
Right. So now you can see you're entering your backyard. This is your backyard garden. This is the entry gate that your guests come in for some sort of a backyard garden
Party or
class, party, event, whatever, right? So then you begin looking at this. Okay, we want to have some of those fairy lights, right? Maybe they come from that corner up there and they come all the way down over here to this house, and this one connects to this so that we have electricity the way we need it. We started thinking about where are we going to put electricity on the outside of the house, where are lines going to be running, where are gas lines going to be running, where is what do you call it, the flushing of a toilet,
septic,
septic, plumbing, all of those types of things. Okay, here's another situation. Rainwater gutters, right? The rain falls right there in this hole right here.
Yeah, and look at the corner of the pitch of the roof. It's coming toward us, and we've created another corner that's a perfect place for water collection with water off that roof.
And over here,
two small pieces of gutter, and you've got that fixed.
Over here, I'd probably put something a little more like aesthetically decorated, maybe just a really nice, pretty, like kitschy little water tank that looks real cute, right?
A larger than normal rain barrel.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then I'm definitely going to create right here. This is my front lawn. This is my pretty little carpet grassed area. This is where my friends come up to enter my little nice patio over here. So then I start thinking about, well, where are the permanent perennial plants that can just grow and take over spaces kind of up near the house? But then how much of the grass out here do I actually, or do I want my dog to be able to just play around on the grass, that kind of stuff, thinking about that. Same thing as we come over here, we started thinking about wanting to have an outdoor restroom because we've got the pavilion and the events that we're putting on out here. So then in terms of planning, this was the next thing we had to do as it came to, we need to connect this into our plumbing and our sewage and all of that kind of stuff. So we've got this indoor, little air-conditioned outdoor bathroom, but now all of a sudden, we've got a corner right here. And I start thinking, well, what if we did some kind of a little outdoor bath, outdoor shower, something like that? So you have to start thinking about how that's going to be up against the house and how this tree and the shade and the electricity and the water, the lines that run. And then if you come back around over here, septic systems. Now I've got septic systems on this side of the house where there's not going to be any like deep rooting trees that are going to be going in over here. And how are we going to fence this side of it? Because this is another entryway door to the house. So then I just start thinking, okay, well, what about some just really, really pretty perennial plants that'll just grow up and kind of cover this side of the house up, grow around the bottom of the patio over there, so that when you drive by, you're kind of seeing something that looks a little more aesthetically pleasing.
You're creating some curb appeal, certainly.
Exactly. From the front side, even though this isn't the front of the house, this is the front side that faces the road. So what do I create out here? Keeping in mind I've got septic that I want to hide, but I also don't want to get into. I don't want to get in the way of it or get involved in it. So these are all of the different types of things that you have to begin thinking about.
Let's dream a little bit here. I would move that picnic table up under this mesquite tree, and there's 1,000 hanging twinkling lights coming down for a nighttime little community spot.
That's definitely an idea. One thing we have to always think about is that mesquite trees like to drip. So, okay, what's the permanent of that? But I can see those twinkly fairy lights up here very easily. So I know that that's something that will come. And then like we said before, off of this deck back here, we've got some opportunity. I would like to, I think, probably earlier rather than later, really get this little area into a screened off situation where it's a little bit more wind protected.
Keep the wasps out.
Yes, and to keep the wasps out so we don't have to participate in that. So these are all the different types of things. Of course, I'm going to be using mulch. That I'm going to be creating raised beds using hugelkultur style as often as I can. But I also, if we begin to run into situations where we've got access to what they call upscaling or reusing different types of wood and things like that, then we'll get wood barriers around our raised beds out here so that it's not just the hugelkultur style that maybe we are ready to put in like a full-fledged, Also, things that I really want us to think a lot about in terms of planning the chickens and how the chickens run, just like we did at the house in the backyard, tunneling and all those really nice. I like some permanent
chickens, you mean?
tunneling. Yes.
Yeah.
I would like some of that where we can just pop them out with some PVC tractoring. And I also know that my animals are going to come out of their run and be placed in a chicken tractor and be taken to the big gardens to get to mow the big gardens. That's a huge part of me wanting to have a lot of different types of small agriculture animals that can help with my regenerative agriculture, is that they have a home, maybe some rabbits, maybe some turkeys, maybe some chickens. Yes, chickens, of course. But then how do I then move them to where I want them to be later parts of the day by using little portable tractors, tunnels, all kinds of things like that. So it's going to be fun, and I'm glad that you guys are here to be a part of this with us, to get us to see us actually take something and grow it. And you kind of saw it a little bit. You saw the urban growth, you saw the change that happened with that, but it was kind of already in place before we really took it off. And you've seen me kind of bring in new things and plant new plants and all of that. But you get to see this evolve, and as many of you who I'm actually coming to your locations and helping you make plans for edible landscape or homestead planning, these are the kinds of conversations that we'd be having. What things do we need to think about? Where does water stand? Where is it really dry? Where do I need to put in more trees for wind block barrier?
Sun position.
Yes, sun position is essential. I'll always make sure that you've got sun in the morning, shade in the afternoon. That's what you really want most for your gardens. Shade, sun position for your chickens, so that in the heat of the summer they'll still keep laying you eggs. They don't stop laying eggs because they're so hot and miserable that they're just trying to stay in the shade all day. They're up in the shade of the tree, and the tree's inside with them. And then over here on this fence line, well, the figs really fall off of a fig tree, and so there's got to be something down there that cleans it up. Okay, so maybe along this fence line that kind of lays over into my chicken coop is where I plant my fig tree, on this side of the yard compared to on the other side of the yard.
Creating a windbreak, you're creating shade, you're creating food
that the chickens can get into. And there's certain things they have access to that I don't mind, and there's certain things they don't have access to. And and the thing about all of that is that number one, it evolves organically. You begin to see, learn. I have to learn this land before I put something on it. And yes, I've been learning this land a little bit more than somebody that's just moving into a new house. But I have to learn this land. I have to learn what we've done with the water movement over here. I have to really look at those things and then begin to be able to make decisions on how I organically evolve my homestead backyard garden space on a larger piece of property, where we want to invite more people out, and where we have a family that lives literally across the little road, right there, and their infrastructure, how does it affect their infrastructure and all of that kind of stuff. And so these are all of the things that we're keeping in mind as we're developing these spaces out here. And this is the reason why when I do an edible or homestead landscape consultation, I will send you a questionnaire up front and ask you some questions, like, tell me some things about your property. It's not so much that I know, and yes, it's good for me to know some things, but it's really so that you think about things that maybe you hadn't thought about before, so that we begin to make decisions. And there's all kinds of things that need to be included in these decisions. The different pieces that you love, the different pieces you don't love, but you also have to think about the quantitative analysis of it. How much is it going to cost? What's the return on investment? And then you also have, but in the midst of that, don't forget the qualitative analysis of what you're living in is essential part of it. That's part of my garden is a sanctuary. That's part of the whole conversation I'm always having about making your space something you actually want to be in. That's the qualitative. If you can't give yourself qualitative return on investment, you're not going to participate in it. So everything you can do to bring it in and make it this beautiful space that you want to can happen, but you got to put some spots on the roadmap, and then you have to be willing to free flow through that road trip vacation that you're taking across your land, creating exactly what you want.
You've also set yourself up for at least 5 years of videos on how to do every single thing that we've just described. This is the place to be.
This is the place to be. I love you guys so much. Please, if you're catching this on YouTube, subscribe, like, comment. If you comment on YouTube with a late question, I promise to come back in, jump on, say hi, and either send you a video with the answer to that question or answer the question directly. If you're catching this live, I love you guys. Thank you for joining me every week. And tomorrow, Dinner Table Talks podcast launches the 100th episode. Woo! Bye.